Today what we will be understanding in the first module of your subject, in the subject of microeconomics, is about the circular flow of income. The circular flow of income is being categorized into three models: the two-sector model, the three-sector model, and the four-sector model. Now, this model has been evolved as and when the economy has evolved over a period of years. The next part of the module 1 will be the concepts of national income, where we would be understanding the GDP and the GNP definitions and the difference between the real and the nominal GDP consumption. Now let's begin with the two-sector model. Now, a circular flow of a two-sector model, like it says, has only two sectors. Now, the two sectors which were present in the olden days in our economy were the households and the business firms. Now, the household sectors were the ones which basically had basic people living, and for them, they used to survive either on the daily consumptions or daily income or on a monthly salary. Now, these two sectors, the households and the business firms, were linked to each other using factor models on the factor payments. Now, in short, from the households, the people used to either give to the business firms labor, land, capital and enterprise. Either of this would go from the households to the business firms. So, labor in terms of manpower, something like land in terms of a space to run their organization, capital was investments, and enterprise was basic businesses which the household people would start. In return, the business firms used to give their factor payments to the households. Now, the factor payments were for labor, the people used to get wages or salaries. Against the land, they received rents. For the capital invested, they received interest payments, and for the enterprises that they started, they would receive profits. So this was how the above part or the upper part of the two-sector model would be complete in a give and take relation. The below part of the two-sector model would begin with consumption expenditure in return of flow of goods and services. So once the money was received in the form of wages or maybe rent, interest or profits, the households would buy the goods and services from the business firms that they would produce, leading to consumption expenditure, in return to which the flow of goods and services would take place from the business firm to the households. Now, this is how the two-sector model would be complete altogether. So, I would repeat, the two-sector model would consist of a household and the business firm, where the households would provide land, labor, capital and enterprise to the business firms, and in return, the business firms would give them factor payments like wages, rents, interest and profits. Out of this income, the households would spend a part or most of this income on the consumption expenditure by buying the goods and services produced by the business firms, and so business firms would return the circle, or would complete this circle by providing the flow of goods and services from them to the households. This was a very, very initial or a very, very old model of circular flow of income. Gradually, with time passing by, the two-sector model evolved and it got converted into a three-sector model. Now, in a three-sector model, there were different sectors which were formed. There was a presence of household and a presence of business firm, but in addition to it, a government came into the picture, and along with it, financial markets or financial intermediaries also were formed. Now, the cycle or the flow of the circular flow was very much simple yet complicated in a three-sector model. Now, the flow would remain the same like we studied in the two-sector, where the households would provide land, labor, capital and enterprise, in return to which the business firms would give them salaries or wages, interest or profits and rentals. Out of which a part of the income now, instead of spending most or all the income of the consumption expenditure with flow of goods and services in return, the households would spend part of the consumption expenditure or a part of the income in three ways. One, as consumption expenditure, where it would spend a little amount on buying the goods and services produced by the business firms. A little part of it would go as net payments or net tax payments to the government. And the third one was they would have a small amount of savings or investment done in the financial intermediaries. Now, in return to this, so when the net tax payment, so when consumption expenditure was done, there was a flow of goods and services from the business firm to the households again. When the net tax payment was done, the government would return to them in terms of different facilities, different public enterprises, different goods and services, subsidies, or sometimes even free services or provision of goods and services. The next or the third part which was used or given back was to the financial intermediaries. Here we would deposit, the households would deposit a little amount of their income in the forms of savings or make few investments. Now, in return to this, the financial intermediaries would give them interest or some kind of profits out of the investments which they have done. On the other side, the business firms were also compelled to pay some kind of taxation to the government in forms of corporation tax, sales tax, VAT, and these days as GST. In return to which the government would purchase their goods and services. Sometimes it would also give them some kind of subsidies, some kind of benefits like cess or some kind of even discount factors which were important for the business firms to grow. So a three-sector model in short would be complete in this way. So let's repeat it. In three-sector model, there were households, there was a business firm, there was a government which was formed, and also financial intermediaries. The households would provide the factors in terms of land, labor, capital, and enterprise to the business firms, in return to which the business firms would give them income in the form of either wages or rentals or interest or profits. Now, these incomes were divided by the households into three categories. The first category was the one which was followed in the two sector, where consumption expenditure was taken care of, and return to which the business firms would give them goods and services produced by them. In the second category, they would pay some net tax to the government, in return to which the government would give them different public enterprises benefits, wages, salaries, government jobs, government pensions, discounts, etc. The third category which was done by the household was they would invest a little amount into the financial intermediaries in the form of savings or investments, and return to which they would get interest and benefits out like profits. On the other hand, the business firms were also compelled to pay some taxation to the government in the form of corporation tax, sales tax, VAT, GST, etc. In return, the government would purchase their goods and services, sometimes give them subsidies or some kind of benefit schemes which would help their business to flourish. A little part of the income which the business firms received from the consumption expenditure was also invested or was also taken, or in short, sometimes when the business firms fell short of money, they would buy loans from the financial intermediaries, and these loans were taken by the business firms, which were actual savings and investments done by the households, and in return to which the business firms would give them would give interest to the financial intermediaries against the loans they have taken. So this would complete the entire business cycle or circular flow of income in a three-sector economy. Moving on from a three-sector economy, what we move on today, what is present today, is a four-sector economy. A four-sector economy is basically an economy which was formed post-globalization. So once the globalization was opened, once India was open to the outside world, a four-sector economy was formed, in which the three sectors which were existing were already there. Only a fourth new sector was was added to it, known as foreign country. So altogether, now the number of sectors which were present in a circular flow was households, business firms, government, financial intermediaries, and foreign countries. Now the business firms, households, government, and financial intermediaries form the same kind of pattern which they formed in the three sector, which we would repeat. Only an additional fourth sector was done, which was because of globalization, which was basically import and export. Now let's start again with the households. The households, like a two-sector model, would provide the factor services to the business firms in form of land, labor, capital or enterprise, in return to which the business firms would give them wages, rent, profits or interest. Now out of this income which the households have received, they would divide this income into three parts. One as consumption expenditure, where they would spend a little amount on buying the goods and services produced by the business firm for their survival. So the business firms would return them with the goods and services purchased by the households. In the second part, they would divide or they would pay taxes to the government, in return to which the government would give them wages, salaries, government jobs, pensions, VRS schemes, etc. The third part of the income was basically spent in financial markets, where the households would lead up into some savings or investments done in the financial intermediaries, in return to which they would get interest payments. On the other hand, the businesses would make sure that they have some net tax payments also done to the government in form of corporation tax, sales tax, GST, VAT, etc. And in return, the government would purchase their goods and services from the business firms and also provide them with different subsidies, different types of schemes which would help their businesses to flourish. Sometimes these business firms would also make some investments or take some kind of loans against the financial markets. Once these loans have been taken, the business firms would return them in the form of intermediaries or in the form of interest payments to the financial markets. Now, since this is a four-sector model, the fourth sector came into the picture post-globalization. And in the fourth sector, which was important, was a formation of foreign countries. Now, these foreign countries were basically markets where import and export would take place. So, on one side, where business firms would export their products into the foreign country, business firms would also import some of their products from the foreign country into India, against which the payments were done either to an individual or to the business firms directly in the form of remittances, or also sometimes as payments to the manpower. Now this manpower was sometimes the household people would also go abroad for work purposes. So in short, the foreign country would complete this circular flow of income of four-sector model by having import and export done from the foreign country to the business firms and from the business firms to the foreign country, in return to which they would receive foreign remittances, make foreign payments, and also have some payments received for the manpower which would travel abroad. This would complete the four-sector economy of a circular flow of income. Now moving on from the circular flow of income from a 2, 3 and finally to a four-sector model which flourishes today, we understand the concepts behind national income like GDP and GNP. Now GDP is basically, it measures the market value of all the final goods and services which are produced within the country for a given period of time, roughly about 1 year. Okay, so it basically does not, so GDP values all the domestic output only, nothing related to the foreign output, and minus all the intermediary goods. So if I have to calculate the GDP of my country, I will either calculate the value of the wheat which is grown in the fields or the bread which is farmed and sold in the market. I will not calculate the intermediary products. Whereas on the other hand, a GNP measures the market value of again the final goods and services which are produced by the country's citizens or by the country themselves. Which means here I would calculate GNP by having GDP in addition to all the income from abroad by the citizens working outside. Now this is what a GDP and a GNP is. Whereas on the other hand, national income is equal to GNP less the depreciation. So depreciation is deducted. In short, if I have to say, a national income will measure the money flow, only money concept and not the valuation. What is the final money which I will earn, which is the MRP of the goods and services which are produced in the country for 1 year or for one defined period of time. I do not calculate the intermediary goods in a national income to avoid any kind of double counting of goods and services. Now, what we understood right now was about GDP, GNP and national income. Let's understand the basic difference between a real GDP and a nominal GDP. Now, a nominal GDP is basically an aggregate market value of all the economic goods and services which we have produced in the country. I'm just talking about the domestic goods and services. But the real GNP or real GDP is basically, again, it is the valuation or the economic valuation of goods and services which are produced in the country, but it is always corrected to the general price level, which means the nominal GDP is not inflation adjusted, but the real GDP is inflation adjusted. And in the nominal GDP, we only talk about the current year, but the real GDP keeps into consideration the base year also. So it's a very, very simple concept where the nominal GDP is again the economic value of goods and services which are being produced within the boundaries of the country but not adjusted to the inflation, whereas the real GDP is the value of goods and services which are produced by the country within the boundaries of the country but is adjusted to the price levels or the inflation levels. Now this completes the module of Macroeconomics 1. So Macroeconomics Module 1 majorly comprises of a lot of concepts, but the most important concepts from the exam point of view and from the understanding point of view is obviously the circular flow of income. 2, 3 and 4 sector models are considered. You should also need to understand the important concepts of national income, which is GDP and GNP, and the very basic difference between the real GDP and the nominal GDP.